to test both man and machine. The championship battle turned upside down when both Christian Fittipaldi and Adrian Fernandez were sidelined with injuries following separate incidents. Their absence, coupled with strong performances, placed Paul Tracy fourth in the championship, despite missing the season opener. Michael Andretti lurks third, only 17 points out of the lead. Trouble in the last three road course events lands Juan Montoya out of the points lead for the first time since Nazareth. Montoya's misfortune is Dario Franchitti's gain. Wins in Detroit and Toronto give him a slim lead in the championship as they race to Mid-Ohio. And the battle for the championship continues in the CART FedEx Championship Series. We're at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course for the Miller Lite 200. This racetrack is unique in the way they start races. Rather than over on the pit straight, they start the races on the long straightaway leading out of the keyhole to the complex of turns that's just behind Parker and I. That's made for some interesting starts in the past couple of years because that complex of turns can be very challenging.
And the rationale for starting on the back straightaway is that the track's wider than on the pit straight. The drivers have an unobstructed view coming down into that first corner. But in 6 of the past 7 races, there have been incidents that have led to yellow flags. Now, the restarts and the finish, well, that'll happen over on the pit straight. But today's race, the drivers can't be too cautious at the start. They've got to be aggressive. They can't give anything away. Blundell and Moore coming from the back. I know this crowd of people. You guys waiting for a great race today? And it should be exciting because behind us is where all the action is going to take place.
Well, as we look at the grid, Dario Franchitti is the new series points leader by virtue of winning the last 2 road course events. He picked up a valuable championship point by winning the pole here at Mid-Ohio. So on the front row, it's Dario Franchitti and Bryan Herta. Herta always qualifies well here, but race day's a different story. Today, he hopes to exercise those demons that haunted him the last 2 years.
The immediate concern for pole sitter Dario Franchitti to avoid any reoccurrence of what happened on the start last year. Moments after the green flag was waved, there was contact between Franchitti, Bryan Herta, Jimmy Vasser, and all 3 were parked. They were done for the day. Now Franchitti again starts from the pole. Herta is alongside, and of course, there is great concern here on the part of these teams whether or not they can get a bold, aggressive, but clean start.
So in the second row, it's Paul Tracy and Tony Kanaan. Tracy quietly moved into the championship hunt. He is the only driver to score points in each of the last 7 races, and he believes he has a shot at the championship.
And keep in mind for Paul Tracy, we now come to the part of the season where he traditionally has run very well. But he says, you know, I'm not driving any differently. He gives all the credit to his crew and specifically to his engineer, Tony Cicali. He says, now my car does exactly what I want it to do.
So in row 3, it's Jimmy Vasser and Gil de Ferran, the last winner on a natural terrain road course. In the 4th row, Helio Castroneves and Juan Montoya on the outside. Back in row number 5, Max Pappas and Robbie Gordon in his 100th start. The 6th row is Michael Andretti and Richie Hearn. Michael Andretti is a 2-time Mid-Ohio winner. Last year, he survived a spectacular end-over-end crash here at Mid-Ohio. In row 7, Mimo Gidley and Cristiano Damata. The 8th row, Jan Magnussen and Walter Salles. Row 9, Mauricio Gugelmin, Michel Jourdain Jr. outside. The 10th row, Roberto Moreno subbing for Christian Fittipaldi and Scott Pruitt. In the 11th row, P.J. Jones subbing for Adrian Fernandez and Al Unser Jr. Naoki Hattori and Luis Garcia Jr. in the 12th row. And look at this 13th row. Greg Moore and Mark Blundello both start in the back owing to problems during their qualifying. Now here's the race analysis for this track and this event. The real key down there at the bottom, fuel range, a very narrow range, and fuel here is critical.
And Paul, as we look down through this grid, notables, Robbie Gordon in 10th position, the best Toyota road course qualifying position ever. This could be his day to get to the podium. Mimo Gidley in 13th spot, great effort for the Peyton Coyne car. Looking farther back, P.J. Jones in 21st in the Renard this weekend. A do-or-die situation. Luis Garcia Jr., his first race for Hogan Racing, and where all the action, I think, is going to occur back in 25th and 26th spot, Greg Moore and Mark Blundell.
So already The pace car has exited on the left side of the track at the pit area. And now Dario Franchitti brings the field around, heading for the keyhole through turn 1, the exit of turn 1 now. They will come into formation after that keyhole carousel turn, and then the starter waits over on the far side. Jim Twintel, the starter. Al Unser Jr. was called in by the team. He's into the pits right now, and they're taking some time with him, working around the restraint there in the cockpit. So Al Unser Jr., even before it started, with some issues.
It looks like they changed his helmet there. They're having radio problems. He should be back in soon.
Now the field forms up. Green flag lies just ahead, and then that set of turns that has been so critical in the past. Franchitti begins the acceleration. Green flag flies. Here we go. Down toward the first turn. So far through that corner, everybody's okay. Oh, could they have gotten it done? Well, in fact, they may have. Through the first set of turns now on this shortened lap, the first lap here at the race. Now down to the bottom section of the course, beginning to climb back up.
You can see Franchitti pulling away from Herta. Tracy obviously very quick at this stage, having problems trying to figure out how to exercise that superiority over Bryan Herta. Bryan's much more cautious this year than last year going down into turn 5 on that start.
Looking at Herta and Tracy, Jimmy Vasser was able to drop into 4th place, and there you see Al Unser Jr. coming back after a fairly lengthy pit stop.
They were trying to have radio communication problems. They were trying to get it fixed. The only solution they thought was changing his helmet, but now he's already a lap down and out of this race, Paul.
On the Mid-Ohio Sports Car course, if you can't keep on the lead lap, you have a very serious problem. So Al Unser Jr. starts with that deficit right out. And he is the only Penske car in competition this weekend.
You can see slots there in front of Juan Montoya. Montoya having a difficult weekend, didn't get a lot of track time because of the rain yesterday. Didn't get the car to his liking, was very fast this morning in warm-up, but very frustrated.
At the end of the first lap, Greg Moore scored in 22nd place, so he begins his climb through the field, starting in 25th, 3 spots forward.
And Mark Blundell is shadowing him. We talked Mark Blundell had qualified 3rd provisionally on Friday. In tech inspection, his car was just a few thousandths of an inch below the 2-inch rule. That is, the outer side pods were just a little lower than they should have been, and they put him back to the last starting position.
Juan Montoya on the pit straight. He's caught up behind Al Unser Jr., trying to catch Gil de Ferran, who has just disappeared around the corner in turn 1. Tony Kanaan, who started 4th, lost a position on the start of the race and has dropped back. Finally, Montoya makes his move to clear Al Unser Jr. And look at this fight for 2nd. Tracy moves into 2nd.
That was a brilliant move. He set up Bryan Herta perfectly going down the long back straightaway downhill. 190 miles an hour, tried to slipstream to the inside. Bryan blocked him there. He went back to the outside, outbroke him on line, aggressively turned across the front of Bryan Herta. Great move there by Paul Tracy.
And now Bryan Herta has to worry about Jimmy Vasser and Tony Kanaan. Matter of fact, Helio Castroneves is sitting just behind and fairly tight to Kanaan as well. Off the carousel, back to the pit straight. 3 laps complete.
And at this stage, you can see him back up behind Bryan Herta here. I think Jimmy Vasser's going to try to figure out how to get by the same way that Tracy did, now pulling Tony Kanaan along with him. The Hondas, you've got to keep in mind here now, are 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th. Very strong, great drivability. Now, what Jimmy's got to do coming off this last corner up in turn 2, leading onto the back straightaway, he's got to be close enough to pick up a draft behind Bryan, and as they come through the kink, turn number 4 here, he's got to be able to pull down the inside, but I don't think he's got quite a run on him. He's got to really concentrate on this entire lap, setting up Bryan Herta to come off that turn number 2 much, much closer than he did that previous lap. Tony's going to obviously try to use the same strategy on Jimmy Vasser.
And while we watch this fight for 3rd, at the front, Franchitti has pulled out 3.3 seconds on Paul Tracy. And there goes Paul Tracy. You can see he's pulled out pretty well on Bryan Herta.
And right now, the 2 Team Green cars are nearly 2 seconds quicker than anyone else on the track, with the exception of Castroneves and de Ferran, but they're over 1.5 seconds quicker than those two cars. So Team Green obviously has the mechanical grip figured out for this demanding Mid-Ohio circuit, and aerodynamically they are dialed in, and there goes Tony Kanaan through the first corner. A very difficult place to pass. You really have to take a risk there, but Tony managed to do it cleanly. Looks like Jimmy Vasser is having problems coming off the low-speed corners because Tony was able to get that done cleanly.
So Tony Kanaan now begins to work on Bryan Herta, and Jan Beekes, Herta does not seem to be all that quick right now. Is there an issue?
A slight issue, Paul, and that is that the car is a little bit loose. They feel that if they have the opportunity to change it during a pit stop, it should get better, but right now he's just trying to hang on.
Mark Blundell just came into the pits, quick stop, and right back out.
That was fuel only for Blundell, Paul.
So a bit of strategy and tactics coming up there. Blundell in and out, top the fuel tank off. We watch Bryan Herta. He sits in third. Kanaan begins to work on him. The green machine, Franchitti and Tracy, have just pulled away from the rest of the field. So they picked up where they left off a week ago at Detroit. 4 laps are complete. We'll be back. Back at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, Dario Franchitti leads for his 7th race of the year and 4 in a row, followed by his teammate Paul Tracy in second. Key battle on the course now. Nothing has changed since we left you. It lies back with Bryan Herta, and Tony Kanaan is working on Herta. There they head off into turn 1.
Kanaan picked up 0.5 seconds on that last lap on Herta, and now he's fallen into the range behind the car where he's starting to get some aerodynamic turbulence. The key here is the keyhole, right where they are now, Paul. Tony's got to come off this corner very, very well in order to get a run on Bryan Herta. By the time they get down to the kink, you've got to be set up in order to try to make a pass to the inside, whereas Tracy did right at the beginning of the race, go around the outside. He's not quite in the position yet. You can see in the camera there that Jimmy has fallen back just a little bit, but on this back section of the course, Tony is much quicker than Bryan. You can see how he pulls up right behind him, but you can't pass through here unless the driver in front of you makes a very big mistake. I don't think Bryan's going to allow that opportunity, so this whole lap has to focus on coming out of the second corner well to try to make the pass down into turn 5.
Robbie Gordon in his 100th start. By the way, they're going to buy a Dan Gurney Eagle and run that on the oval races for the remainder of the year, but Gordon sits in 11th place, but he may have a problem, Gary.
Well, it's a concern. I don't know that it's a problem yet, Paul, but the team is closely monitoring tire pressures. They believe that the car's been slow for tire pressures to come up. He has lost 1 spot, currently listed in 11th position as they flash through. He had a great test here right after the US 500 at Michigan. They got back on track after a lot of frustration, made some major changes in the shock development program. They thought they were in for a great weekend. He was extremely fast this morning, along with a couple of other Toyota drivers in the warm-up.
Yeah, the Toyota engine came on strong for this event with their best road course ever, the RV8D being the engine that they are all using. Franchitti leads it, Tracy 3.5 seconds back. Search back through the field. We're wanted to catch a good shot of Roberto Moreno. He started 19th, now is 15th. And Greg Moore is kind of stuck in 22nd. He started 25th. There is Moreno still substituting, and we take you back to the front of the field. Moreno, by the way, is likely to be in that car pretty close to the end of the season. Christian Fittipaldi was here the first 2 days of the event and then left to go back home, but Christian has indicated that this may be a fairly lengthy recovery as he tries to come back from his head injury.
I talked to Christian for a while on Friday, and you can tell he's hurt, Paul. He took a huge shot at St. Louis during that testing accident. And talking to him, you can see that he's still there. It's just the shine, the sparkle in his eyes isn't there right now. And you just get the feeling of a guy that's jet-lagged with the flu, and you can tell he just hurts all over. And it's going to take him a while to come back. And with a head injury that he sustained, you want to make sure you're completely healed before you come back in these sorts of cars that are so demanding physically and mentally.
3 interesting stories sitting right here together on the racetrack. We'll start with Greg Moore. He is the only Forsythe Players car that is out there today owing to the accident involving Patrick Carpentier, his teammate last week, when the left rear wheel of Mauricio Guzman's car hit Carpentier in the helmet not once but 3 different times. and at one point actually bending Carpentier over so far that his helmet touched the bottom of the steering wheel and his legs. Despite all that and a lot of soreness, he expects to be back in 1 week at the new Chicago Speedway.
And if you think about that for just a moment, you are strapped in with shoulder harnesses so tight you can't lean forward, and yet the severity of having Gugelmin on top of him, the weight of that impact pushed him all the way underneath the steering wheel. It's amazing that he wasn't hurt worse. I think God was really smiling on Patrick. And don't forget, just a short time prior to that, Max Pappas's wheel and tire came in to the cockpit and bruised his arms on 3 different spots where it had banged around inside the cockpit. So very fortunate young man, Patrick Carpentier.
And there's P.J. Jones. Now he's substituting for his teammate, Adrian Fernandez, who had to have some pin work done on the fracture in his wrist when he got his hand and arm entangled in the steering wheel on a contact with the wall during practice for the race at Detroit. And P.J. Jones is just happy as can be that he now has a chance to drive the Reynard. Remember, he's been in the Swift all season, and he's really happy to have this ride.
And we've got to share with the folks at home this weekend, because he's in Adrian's car, he's been renamed Pedro Jones. So that's his name for the weekend, or at least for the immediate future while substituting. And I had a question for Jan. Now that we've got Pedro Jones, we've got Jan Magnussen, Juan Montoya, Jan Bikas. Am I now Parker Johnstone? That's what I need to know, Jan.
Yes, you can be that.
You can be that.
Okay, just checking.
One of the other people to watch, this is Luis Garcia Jr., the 21 car in the Hogan livery, but still with his Tang sponsorship on the side. He has now made that move over to Hogan Racing and is the teammate of Helio Castroneves. At the front, still Franchitti, Tracy, Herta, Kanaan. And they are continuing to fight, but they have not been able to resolve much.
As we watch this onboard, Paul, you'll see why Mid-Ohio is the most physically demanding track in the FedEx Champ Car Series. Lots of uphills, downhills, severe lateral loading. The drivers never have a time to rest. Even though there are straightaways here, these cars are so fast. As you've said, the faster the car is, the shorter the straightaways become. They hardly have a chance to make boost adjustments, talk on the radio, let alone sway bar adjustments, because they are shifting constantly. Puts a lot of strain on the upper body, the lower body. And if you look at just the elevation changes alone, it's uphill here to turn 2, a long downhill all the way to turn number 5. Then it's uphill to 6, downhill to 7, uphill to 8, downhill to 9, uphill to 10, downhill to 11, back uphill to 12, then back downhill to turn 1, so they just never get a chance to rest. And usually at this race, it's hot and humid on top of it. Cockpit temperatures can exceed 130 degrees Fahrenheit. The driver's heart rates while driving, 155 to 170 beats a minute. For an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes, takes tremendous aerobic conditioning and lots of upper body strength.
Kanaan can close through this part of the course and gets up almost on top of him by the exit of the carousel. Then on the pit straight, he's pretty tight to him, but then Herta's able to pull away through the keyhole.
And the key corner for passing, as we've talked about, is that keyhole corner. And Brian is very, very good coming off the keyhole. It's an area where his team owner, Bobby Rahal, has spent a lot of time making sure the car in the past has worked perfectly. Same thing for Brian and Max Pappas, because you know if you can't pass there, chances are they won't be able to get you anywhere else unless you make a mistake.
Now watch through there. Brian got away a little bit coming off of 1. And this is where in the past couple laps he's been able to outpull Kanaan. And that's kept Kanaan from going after him on the inside of the right-hander coming up.
And I think the consensus there is that Ford is the horsepower king. They have the best top-end power. The Hondas have the best drivability. So what you're seeing is there's maybe a little difference in engine power plants and where they work the best, with Brian being able to pull a little bit on the straightaways, Tony having a little bit better flexibility and use of being able to control the back of the car on throttle so he can get through this back section a little better than Brian.
All right, we want to get you back up to the front of the field. Franchitti is the leader. Paul Tracy, 3.7 seconds back. We look down from the Honda Helican. That's the leader working through turn 1. All alone. That's a beautiful ride if you're sitting out in front, and especially if you're leading the points. Gil de Ferran sits back in 7th now, sandwiched between Helio Castroneves and Juan Montoya. Jan Bikas.
Well, remember, Paul, he is on the Goodyear tires, and Goodyear brought a new construction tire here this weekend because Gilles de Ferran was trying so hard to warm his tires in Detroit that he thinks that might be the reason for his crash, because we have noted that the Goodyears seem to take a little longer to come up to temperature. So they brought a new construction, and they hope that he'll be able to get the speed quicker than he has all year.
And Jan, from Gilles de Ferran's camp with Derek Walker, a quick conversation just prior to the start of the race, concerned because of all the rain yesterday and the fact that this track was again what the drivers call so green this morning. Derek thinks that there'll be concern about graining on the left front Goodyear tire on this first run prior to their first pit stop. They're hoping that they don't lose too much in handling so that they can get to the stop, make the change, get fresh rubber on, because their feeling is as the day progresses, and perhaps Parker could address this, conditions will continue to improve. More rubber on the track, more heat, more grip, etc.
And Gary, now that you've mentioned that, I've been looking at the left front tire of Gilles de Ferran, and you can actually see about a 4-inch band developing on that left front tire where it looks like it's already starting to grain. So we're going to try to take a look at that. You can see it right, whoops. I was a little bit too quick. As we get the right shot and the sun reflects off it, you'll be able to, if you focus on that left front, you'll be able to see it there. You can see it just coming off the corner. There it is right there. If you look closely, you can see that band starting to develop on that left front tire.
I will keep track of that, and the run by Dario Franchitti, which is spectacular to this point. Roberto Moreno just passed Cristiano D'Amata. That's a pass for 14th. Otherwise, nothing has changed. Kanaan still working hard on Herta, and he has not been able to get up and get around it. We'll be back. Roberto Moreno has been moving forward just before we left you. He came out and around Cristiano D'Amata, and just a moment ago he got around Richie Hearn. Now sits in 13th place as he begins to pick him off.
As deep and as competitive as this field has become, it's not as easy as just saying, well, he moved back through some guys that weren't quite as fast. He's had to fight for every one of these positions. Obviously, he is very, very comfortable with the car he's been charging. You can see him pick up coming off into the back Thunder Alley section here, driving extremely well. The car, both he and Michael's car, look extremely stable and have all weekend long.
Back to the front of the field. In theory, it leads. Franchitti there with 4 seconds on his teammate Paul Tracy. Herta still third. Kanaan still fourth, followed by Vassar and Helio Castroneves. In theory, in the next 3 laps, we ought to see the beginning of the first round of pit stops. But I'm getting varied reports from the track on exactly how long it will be until everyone decides to come in. Look at that interval from first to second. Well, Paul Tracy has been in pretty good spirits the past couple of races, and I asked him, now Jourdain Jr. is already in the pits. I was talking to Paul, and I said, you know, despite missing the first race of the year, you're up there in the points. He says, yeah, I'm going for a championship.
Considering that he missed the first race and a potential of 21 points at Homestead, he has stormed back. Lap before this, he just turned the race's fastest lap. He obviously is very happy now. Barry Green has picked his option up for the year 2000. And I think, as we've said the last couple of races, we are seeing finally, after the travails at Penske, Newman, Haas, back to Penske, that maybe this is the Paul Tracy, the potential, the talent that everyone's known was there the whole time is finally coming to fruition.
Boy, the impact of the Penske announcement last week. Greg Moore and Gilles de Ferran as his drivers for the next 3 years. And no true certainty on any of suppliers or equipment has sent some reverberations through the sport that continue to ripple. Now you've got a lot of drivers trying to figure out the game of musical chairs that leads to the end of the season and has started much earlier than normal. Juan Montoya, he chases Gilles de Ferran. That's a battle for 7th.
You can see the concrete patches on all of the corners. Those are installed to keep the asphalt from tearing up from the high lateral loading and from the acceleration forces. But you'll notice there's a little patch of asphalt just on the inside. The drivers alter their lines trying to make sure those inside wheels are right along that asphalt because there's more grip there than there is on the concrete.
Tell us how the car is, if you want any wing or anything on the stop. Repeat. Do you want any wing on the stop? half a turn front. Half. 10-4, half a turn up.
Montoya asking for the change.
And you can tell it's hard for him to get that radio communication in. It's the only track we've been to so far this year that, listening on the scanner the last few days, the drivers have to take a moment when they come into the pits to regain their breath and focus and concentration to debrief. And if they start talking too soon, they can barely talk because they're so out of breath. You can see Montoya couldn't answer right away. He had to find a moment to even touch the radio button.
Looking both from Montoya's view as he chases the Farron and the view down from the Honda Helicam down to the lowest part of the racetrack. And they climb back up the hill around the carousel. There's the entrance to the pit. And onto the pit straight with no change. And speaking of the pits, up at the front of the field, Dario Franchitti, Paul Tracy, the Green Machine, the dominant power is here. But Gary Gerould, we should see them in sometime in the fairly near future.
Oh, I think what it's going to be very interesting here for the Green Machine and those two drivers, Franchitti and Tracy, is whether or not they pit on the same lap. They have the luxury of an intermediate space, a slot in the wall between their two pit boxes. The pit boxes at Mid-Ohio are the shortest of the entire year at 35 feet 4 inches. So you don't have the luxury of a lot of room. This team, however, has the added advantage of that slot between the pit boxes and also the fact that they've now opened up a substantial lead on the rest of the field. We are told that the fuel mileage for Franchitti is fractionally better than that for Paul Tracy. So, in fact, if Tracy's not getting as good a mileage, he may be in on the same lap as Dario. We'll see what happens here as we await the first stop of the afternoon.
Let's go a little further down the pits now. Jan Beekes.
An update on Bryan Herta. We talked about the fact that he was a little bit loose at the beginning of the race. Well, now the radio communications would tell us that he is very loose, and he's just hanging on to that car, trying to hang on to the spot. And until he makes his pit stop, it'll probably get even worse.
The leaders have just crossed over on the 23rd lap, and some indications are that the leader, Dario Franchitti, may try to go all the way to lap 30 if, in fact, he can. There is Bryan Herta. Tony Kanaan behind him. Vassar just behind Kanaan, and Vassar ready to work Kanaan. Darts out, but no, he can't get it done. He wasn't close enough.
And the consequences for Bryan Herta having a very loose car here, Paul, is that there are only two high-speed corners where he's really got to hold on. The rest of these transitions are much easier for a driver to deal with an oversteering car in Mid-Ohio than they would be, say, on an oval or some of the other road courses they go to. But still, you can see he's not giving up any of his interval, but he still has to hang on coming up to especially this next left-hand corner.
And once again on the last lap, Paul Tracy was the fastest, but Dario Franchitti, his teammate, is still the leader. Green Machine, Team Green. 1998, they were still trying to put it together. Remember at Houston when they got together running 1-2? And then this year at St. Louis, they still hadn't worked it out. Both cars touch once again. Then at Toronto, finally they figured out how to do it. A 1-2 finish. And at Detroit last week, they liked it so much they did it again. And now here at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, Team Green 1-2, 26 laps complete, and together they have almost 12 seconds on third place, Bryan Herta.
It just shows you when things go right, they really do go right. Remember, they struggled a little bit last year. Paul Tracy trying to find the setup. Very, very difficult year. Franchitti with success, but now both drivers and the team have really come into their own. Their engineer, Tino Belli, has figured out some substantial improvements on the car aerodynamically. The engineers, Don Halliday and Tony Sicali, have got the mechanical aspects of the cars figured out. You can see they have become a dominating force.
You know, and you can talk about those things. Jimmy Vassar is on his way in the pits. We'll touch on that in just a moment. Gary?
Question is being decided whether or not a wing change would be appropriate for Vassar as he came up pit road, glides right in on the marks, and for the first time today, this part of the Ganassi team goes to work. We'll watch for the change. There's one on the left front side, now one on the right front side as well, holding him for the fueling, and he's gone. Let's go to Jan.
Well, Robbie Gordon is on his way in as well. We've talked about their tire pressure woes, and they are going to let a little pressure out of the rear, and they're also going to try and put some front wing, actually took some front wing out, I saw up there. So now they're just going to wait for the fuel. They do not drop it off the jack. That's 14.2, and it shows the difference if you leave the car up on the jacks during a stop.
Richie Hearn back into action from his stop. This is on the leader lap 28. Franchitti, Tracy, Herta, Kanaan, Castroneves, DeFerrin, Montoya all have yet to come in. Top 7 cars.
The only adjustments the crews can make during those pit stops, besides putting the fuel in, obviously are wing changes, maybe a wicker change at the back, but that takes a long time, and the tire pressure changes. So if we're out with, if you watch Gordon stop, they took some wing out of the front. That means the car was oversteering, and they lessened the rear tire pressure. It's the same as softening the rear springs, brings some stability to the back of the car.
You ride with Montoya 7th. He chases Gil DeFerrin in 5th. While we watch this, remember that Montoya did ask for a little bit of wing, not much. And Parker, you were talking about Team Green and Tino Bella and the work that he's done, but with all of that work, it all ends up in the hands of the crew because they have been doing long hours manufacturing parts to constantly keep them on this car and keep testing all the things that they're drawing. Cristiano D'Amata out of the pits, and Paul Tracy.
Wide open. You can get right onto the box this time. Square to the wall. We want you square to the wall.
Paul Tracy in, Gary Gerald's there.
Square to the wall,
They've
right
answered,
on the box, right
they've answered the question now. Franchitti stayed out, so Tracy, first of the front runners in. We watch the time as we watch the crew on the back of the car.
Done. Watch Tony, watch Tony.
Boy, listen to the revs go up.
Go, mate, go. All clear.
And a Jan.
And Brian Herta just leaves as well. So Brian Herta, quick service. We'll see what happens as far as the positions at pit out.
Tony Kanaan is not able to get it up to speed coming out. Could just be a gearbox problem.
He hasn't gotten to his pit yet, Paul. He's just coming by the Tracy pit. Here comes the crew. I don't know if he ran out or not. Engine is still alive. Franchitti will be in the next lap.
Now the McDonald's crew tries to improve the drive through there for Tony Kanaan. Actually slowed on his way in. So far the stop is nominal. And Dario Franchitti
Around Montoya's guy.
moves in behind P.J. Jones and heads for his pit. Gary?
Kim Green on the radio with Dario Franchitti, who leads the season championship points. Everything appears routine. They've adjusted tire pressures, no wing adjustments. Fueling complete. Franchitti's gone in just over 13 seconds. Montoya's up next.
Montoya right in behind him. Montoya coming out of second place. Franchitti.
Tires are on. Ready? Go, go, go.
Quick last-minute change to the right front wing. You wondered for a second whether or not they were going to do it and added it almost as an afterthought. Dario Franchitti maintains the lead of the race as he comes out after a good stop by the green machine. Greg Moore comes in. He has not worked his way forward in the field as anticipated. He comes in from 10th place. And routine for Moore.
And that 10th place position is only as a result of the pit stops that have gone on. Once they sort out, he'll fall back to where he was before he came in. And Dario Franchitti, we've seen it so often in the past, be able to go so quickly and still be very, very good on fuel mileage. We saw that also of Montoya. Oh, big twitch coming onto the pit straightaway there. And notice how the interval is closed up on those stops between Franchitti and Tracy. Tracy's crew obviously able to do a very, very quick pit stop. Tracy turning the race's quickest lap so far. Now obviously wants to get back up behind Dario and try to make a pass for the lead if it's possible during the center section of this race.
Well, with all of that, we've, of course, kept track of everybody. Back in third place, you should see him coming over the rise in about, well, there he is. Roberto Moreno now sits in third, but he has not been into the Newman Haas pits. remember that the Newman Haas cars have a tendency to be able to go a bit further on fuel, Jan.
And Paul, the Moreno crew has already rolled out the tires, but you're right. What a great run for Roberto Moreno to be able to take it this far on fuel.
Of course, we have to be careful because this far may not be all the way to the pits if he is running very shallow on fuel. You can get it down to the last couple of ounces, but when it shuts off, there's no warning at all.
Only a few years ago, the car would burble, give you some fuel pressure warnings, but now the teams have it figured out to such an exact science that when it uses those last few ounces of fuel, the motor just stops, and he's pitting.
Roberto Moreno turns onto the pit road. There is a climb at first to come up the hill. Jan?
Yes, and of course he has to maintain 50 miles an hour until he gets here. And you would assume that this pit stop might take a little bit longer because we know for sure has used all the fuel in this car. No wing changes, just waiting for the fuel. Oh, that was pretty quick. 12.5 on my watch.
Good stop for Roberto Moreno. Now, remember, Tony Kanaan motored into the pits fairly slow. He's back up to speed on the course, but Gary, what was up?
Well, apparently Tony told the crew he thought he was out of fuel as he labored up the hill. And remember, it's an uphill push to where he is located in one of the final pits here at Mid-Ohio. Just checking with the team, they indicate that their telemetry may be off just a tad. And in fact, he may have been running out of fuel.
Well, that's a story on Tony Kanaan. Here is the pit in and pit out with Kanaan suffering terribly and Herta dropping back a position. Montoya comes from 8th up to 3rd.
And the reason the teams take the risk to run the fuel so low to try to extend the mileage, because if they can get an extra lap or two and a yellow comes out, they pick up significant track advantage. So that's why they take the risks they do, running them right to the last few ounces.
Tony Kanaan looks to the inside of Scott Pruitt, but now will have to drop behind him, at least until they get around to turn 1 once again. And the seemingly last one to come in, Mark Blundell. Jan Beekes?
Well, keep in mind that this is not his first stop, because a few laps into the race, they decided to come in and pick up some fuel. So he is a little bit out of sequence from some of the other guys. And boy, it takes a long time for the fuel for this car, but still pretty quick. A little bit over 12 seconds for Blundell.
Blundell makes his stop on the 33rd lap. That takes care of everybody in the field. They settle down to some high-speed racing once again. We'll be back. It's the Pepsi 400 at Michigan Speedway. Can Jeff Gordon make it 2 in a row? For more, log on to ESPN.com, part of the Go Network, go.com. No changes while we've been away. Franchitti, Tracy, Montoya, the great stop, has been able to move up into 3rd place. We mentioned that. Other than that, there are no real changes in the field, though there are probably some disappointments. Roberto Moreno, with his late stop, dropped down into 10th position, but Greg Moore and Mark Blundell have really not been able to move forward nearly as much as we would have thought. Moore is 17th and Blundell is 22nd.
Yeah, big surprise there, Paul. I thought that they would have come up through the field a little bit quicker. Mark Blundell, with his sense of humor, said, hey, look, I'm more aerodynamic than I used to be after I crushed that vertebra. I sit lower in the car. I've got an advantage here. And I am pleasantly surprised at the toughness of Mark Blundell. Being the most physical course, he's only had another race back at Detroit, and he's been tough all weekend here, but yet he hasn't moved up the way we thought, and that is a surprise.
Mark Blundell started in the back because on the post-qualifying inspection on the Friday qualifying, which was the only one that mattered, they were found in violation of the 2-inch clearance rule, and so his time was disallowed. He would have started in 3rd place had that not happened. Leader is trying to work on the back of the field now. That's Garcia in his new ride. Now the other big move, and the one that we mentioned, is Montoya. sits in third place with a great move forward, Gary.
Yes, indeed. I was also going to reference that situation relating to Franchitti coming up behind Garcia, because there had been lobbying going on here amongst Ken Green and the Team Cool Green guys with kart officials about the fact that they felt their progress was being impeded. As for Montoya, he has been very frustrated all weekend long. He came here to test early in the season, had 2 days. By the end of the second day, he said the car was brilliant after they struggled, but then they didn't participate in the open test right after the US 500. Firestone changed compounds and construction on the tire they brought to Mid-Ohio. Juan thought that maybe that was a contributing factor to his frustration on Friday. Yesterday, a washout, of course, because of the rain. Morning warm-up, he was still frustrated. I think he's got to be smiling now after that terrific pit stop, and Chip Ganassi doing some cheerleading, telling him he's doing a terrific job and that he is gaining on the leaders in those green and white cars.
And Paul, in the last 5 laps, he's picked up 5 seconds on Dario. He's dropped the interval from 16 seconds, now almost down into the 11-second range. An amazing run here. I think he's no longer frustrated, only the fact that he still has 11 seconds to go to get to Dario Franchitti. But remember, he's got to get past the back markers and Paul Tracy first.
And just watch his hands as he throws the car all over the track here. He has just incredible car control. Update on Brian Herta, Jan.
We talked to you about the fact that he was loose in the first stint, and they did not make any wing changes, but they did make some changes in regards to the tire pressure. They lowered the tire pressure. He now has a car that handles better, but of course they lost that spot on pit road.
We're going to take you back and put you on board with Tony Kanaan. And P.J. Jones just ahead of him, and this is a fight for position as he moves to the inside position, holds it, and Tony Kanaan gets past P.J. Jones.
He set him up perfectly. He got a good run coming out of the keyhole, pulled up in the draft going through the kink, and outbraked him perfectly down the inside of turn number 5. Textbook passing at Mid-Ohio.
You ever remember with that very long stop that they had, this pass actually put Kanaan only in 18th, when previous to the stops he was up there contending with the leaders. Onto the pit straight, there is the line, and we're just going to ride with Tony Kanaan here. Looking back from Jan Magnussen's car, that's Greg Moore. Moore is currently 17th. After Kanaan got around Pruitt, or got around Jones, by the way, Jones ran off and back on, but he lost 1 position to Scott Pruitt, dropping to 20th. Pruitt up to 19th. Then Moore. That's the battle. The 19 car ahead is not a factor in this. But Magnussen and Moore for the past couple laps have been closing on one another and fighting for position. They're fighting for 16th. Front of the field remains the same. Another 2 key moves that can happen here. Can Magnussen get out and around Jourdain Jr. and then can Moore follow him, and can Moore take advantage of it? And can Kanaan? Who wouldn't have thought that Kanaan could get in there, but he certainly took the opportunity when Jourdain moved over.
Well, and Jourdain obviously just lifted early, got on the brakes a little sooner to allow them to come through. He knows that he's out of contention for the race now. It's a good bit of heads-up driving by Michel Jourdain Jr. there.
It's not a full closure yet, but we are keeping track on it. Juan Montoya continues to whittle away at first and second. He closed from 13 to 12 to 11 to 10, and last time around 8.7 seconds back from the leader of the race. Dario Franchitti, Paul Tracy, the Green Machine, they control the run here. Have from the start. But Montoya looks like he's going to have something to say about that. Wasn't charging past couple of events at Elkhart Lake. Dominated most of the race, but then the gearbox went away. And that ended his race there. At Toronto, he got involved with Michel Jourdain Jr. And at Detroit, he was trying to come back up through the field and got involved in Moreno. Now, it didn't end his race, but it ended any opportunity to try and win. Today, he sits here in third place. And Parker, he's been closing hard.
He just again set the race's quickest lap, looking down the inside of Walter Salas in turn 1 here, and he has been every single lap taking substantial chunks of interval away from Tracy and Dario Franchitti, the leader. And as soon as he can find a way past Salas, which he should be able to do now coming down this back straightaway, he's going to start again. He fell back just a little bit because of being blocked by traffic, but here he goes. 185, 190 miles an hour coming down into turn 5.
So slowed for a second as he tries to get around Salas. Now he resumes his pursuit. We're going to drop back behind Montoya. Brian Hurta, Jimmy Vasser. This is the fight for 4th. Hurta qualifies well here, has led here, hasn't been able to convert that. Look at there. Now Helio Castroneves comes into the fight, currently 6th. The Ohio State electric race car team gave him a lucky Buckeye. And he's hoping that maybe that will help him today. Some of his other tailsmen have not been so lucky, though he's had some pretty good runs this year. Now that team supports 2 cars. That's going to put a little stress on the team until they get all that sorted out. Here come the leaders.
And look at Paul Tracy. He has really closed up that gap. He is right behind Dario Franchitti now. This is what it looked like when they came out of that last pit stop. Tracy looked like he was on the charge. And with the traffic ahead, he's going to try to set up Dario when they get to the backside of the course to try to make a run on him coming down that long back straightaway.
Remember, too, this has been a changed Paul Tracy. Been driving with a lot more reserve, a lot more maturity. Race has 45 laps complete.
Traffic ahead, +4.5 on 1, +4.5.
That's Paul Tracy's engineer, Tony Sekeli. Great engineer and one of the best driver coaches around. You can see he's trying to get up really close here, so he's right behind Dario on the exit of turn number 2.
Tracy has been much faster, as Parker's indicated. Certainly doesn't appear so there, though, does it?
Boy, he's really falling back coming down the straightaway. Now, of course, there is some interval involved simply because the time is the same, but that interval will be greater at speed. But still, that looked like he fell back a little bit there going down the straightaway, as Dario's being held up now by P.J. Jones.
Montoya is 3.5 seconds back. Look down from above. Here's the Honda Helicam. P.J. Jones and Adrian Fernandez's car. Then Franchitti, then Tracy. We're looking to see whether or not Montoya, he's not that close yet. In fact, he dropped back a bit on the last lap. Gary Gerould?
That traffic situation for the leader, Dario Franchitti, is really interesting. They go through turn 1. They head toward the carousel. It's jammed up, and Ken Green just continues to lobby every lap here with officials. He says, we're going a second a lap faster than these guys. You've got to get them moved out of the way. They are very frustrated in that respect, and Paul Tracy, of course, is right there knocking on the door as Barry Green comes over to join the conversation now.
Well, he was absolutely accurate in that one lap. Montoya took a full second off. Now Franchitti gets past P.J. Jones, and Tracy may have to sit there back for the full lap, and here comes Montoya. No, P.J. Jones lets him by. Look at the comparison, Tracy to Montoya. Of course, Tracy was running behind Franchitti, who was behind P.J. and Montoya was mostly in the clear.
It'll be interesting to see how much patience Montoya has with PJ, because he knows if he doesn't get by PJ right away, he's going to lose contact with Dario and Paul. I would expect he's going to make a run coming down into turn 1 once they get out of here, but the Ford in front of him's got a lot of power. Unless PJ helps, it's not going to happen.
Did you see the vigor of that one corner worker given the move over flag, which is an advisory, not an order? Like Erie Communications does the flagging here, and he was waving. There's another one giving him all he's got. PJ finally moves off to the left side. He sees Montoya. Montoya comes through on the keyhole.
He had a great run on PJ on the exit of turn 1. Lots of exit speed there. I don't think PJ had a choice. Montoya was coming through whether PJ wanted him to or not.
Or the corner workers, for that matter.
That's right.
So Franchitti is 1.4 ahead of Tracy, and Montoya continues to close. Now they are all clear of back marker traffic. So we'll see what Montoya can do. And Robbie Gordon at this point is running in 12th place. Franchitti is the leader. No change in the order. Montoya is now 2.4 back from second place, Paul Tracy. Hearn is right behind Gordon. And we go back to the front of the field. Down the elevations to the lowest point on the track and begins to climb again. Montoya's right there.
Dario's turned up the wick. He's been able to pull the interval on Paul, but Montoya looks like he's closing a little bit now on Tracy. So I think it's one of those situations where Dario knows he needs to give himself some breathing room, because if he catches traffic again, he can't afford to have his teammate and Montoya right behind him. He needs a little bit of room to work so that he can get around that back marker and then hopefully put some distance between himself and Paul and Juan.
Pretty evenly spaced as they came off of turn 1 through the keyhole. Again, the long straight. Franchitti under no challenge, and for that matter, Paul Tracy will not be under challenge again at this critical passing area this lap around. So 30 points. Michael Andretti currently sitting back in 9th place. Been pretty quiet most of the weekend.
This is the keyhole, turn number 2 on the track. The driver's through here, second gear, about 70 miles an hour. Leads onto this long back straightaway. 6th gear here, speeds of approaching 190 miles an hour, 195 on the draft. Down to 3rd gear through turn 5. Uphill through turn number 6. Accelerating up to 120 miles an hour in these short chutes, down to 70, 75 miles an hour in the corners. Very difficult section here. Blind flat out in 4th gear over the top of this rise. A lot of the drivers will go down to 3rd gear over the top of turn number 10. Ford flexibility allows them to remain in that higher gear. 165 miles an hour, then down on the brakes, 115 miles an hour through here. 135, right back down to 70 miles an hour. This long sweeping right-hand carousel corner, a small dip down onto the pit straight. They reach 170 miles an hour down into turn 1, just tap the brakes. A lot of the drivers downshifting here as well. And back up to the keyhole again. You can see the drivers are always very, very busy. Little time to rest here at Mid-Ohio.
Michael Andretti challenging no one, challenged by no one. He sits in 9th. Franchitti at the front. The last 2 times that a driver has led every lap of a race was Toronto last month and Houston last year. And both times the driver was Dario Franchitti. But Montoya, this may be the lap. Onto the pit straight, turn 1 ahead. Montoya, if he can get closed in when they come off of the keyhole, he just might be able to get alongside of Paul Tracy.
Montoya once again very good on the exit of turn number 1. He's been catching Paul 2/3 of a second a lap. Sort of stabilized right here. I think he's having a little problems. The aerodynamics getting close enough to actually make a move. But both he and Paul have now caught up to Dario. They were both a couple of tenths quicker on that last lap.
And though he tries to close once again, it's not going to happen there. But he's gained just a few more feet, which is what he's been doing every lap on Paul Tracy. Perhaps the next time around will be it. We'll be back with more from the Miller Lite 200. The Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course. Montoya has not been able to get by Tracy. Now they come for the keyhole again. This time he's even closer, but look on Tracy relative to Dario Franchitti. First, second, and third are right there.
As Montoya's pushed Tracy, Tracy's now pushing Dario. It looks to me, Paul, like Paul Tracy's car is just a little bit slower going down the straightaway than either Dario or Montoya. Maybe a little different setup on aero package or just the way they're coming off the keyhole corner. But it looks like he's losing a little bit of ground. But Paul, very, very quick back in this madness section of the track.
Very soon we're likely to see some major changes because we're approaching the 55th lap. And there's the very real possibility that both of the Green Machine cars, Tracy and Franchitti, will be in at the end of this lap. Also, Jimmy Vasser was expected in. The teams now began to lay their equipment out in the pit area. So Franchitti off. Tracy stays out. Montoya keeps the pursuit going. Franchitti has to come all the way down to the end of the pits, and Gary Gerold's right there.
This is where races are obviously won and lost when it's tough to pass on the course.
You'll be fine.
This is a couple of laps earlier than we might have thought based on the first stop. Little problem momentarily on the right front. Got it. No wing changes. Franchitti is rolling.
And here comes Montoya as he works on Tracy. Tracy on the inside line down, but he can't hold the position. Will Tracy be in a good position to keep it and come back? No, he can't. Montoya moves into the lead, but both of these cars are due in any moment now. Jimmy Vasser did come into the pits. Routine stop for Vasser. So Montoya gets the pass, but now the pit crews will have to battle it out.
And that was the exact same move that we saw Paul Tracy put on Brian Herta at the beginning of the race.
One car off. Al Unser Jr. Al Unser Jr. through the gravel pit and up against the tires. Boy, kicked up a lot of dust. And Robbie Gordon is in the pits, and he just came in, and Gordon's out. Still yellow only in that one spot of the race course. Montoya and Tracy both continued on. Still local yellow only. Tracy's not able to challenge Montoya. Here's a replay of Unser Jr. off at turn one.
Wow, he came into turn one hot on the outside, got the brakes locked, and you can tell that, boy, once it went off and got in the marbles, there was no farther changing direction or much loss of speed for that matter. He went off there a ton. Fortunately, the gravel trap helped slow him down a little bit, and double rows of tires helped to lessen the impact.
And the angle of attack also wasn't that bad. Al Unser Jr. climbs out of the car through the fence, and you can do a climb like that, you're obviously okay. We still watch for Montoya and Tracy. Montoya's picked up the lead of the race.
And he stays out another lap, Paul. This is very interesting strategy since Dario went so far the first time, and now his teammate Tracy's in.
So Paul Tracy, though, peels off and comes in on the 57th lap.
All right, now we'll see what happens for Paul Tracy in terms of service. We thought that we might see Tracy and Montoya on the same lap. Montoya going a lap further on order from Chip Ganassi. Everything looks to be right there for Tracy. 11.7 seconds. Nice stop.
5/10 faster than his teammate. Here comes Franchitti as Tracy comes out. Oh, and Garcia up in the carousel. Fast spin there, and if he can get restarted, he can get going. This too should be only a local yellow, and again the carousel not really a critical passing area. Montoya the focus now, 57 laps complete, should be in. And there he goes, he's onto the pit road, climbs the hill up the pits. His pit again is way down at the other end, slows to 50.
Yeah, nothing fancy.
And he roars toward Gary Gerold.
Slow down, slow down.
You hear Chip Ganassi in the background. Remember, he's saying nothing fancy. They got to keep this young, energetic rookie calm down. Boy, is he a terror on the racetrack. Remember, he gained 5 spots on his first pit stop.
Go, go, go!
12.5 seconds. He's out of here.
And here comes the green machine. There's Montoya just ahead of him. So Montoya was able to get out ahead of both the green cars. Garcia still sitting there on the outside edge of the keyhole. Michael Andretti is in.
Oh, and he almost had the same problem we saw in Milwaukee. He started to leave early, and he almost got the vent man and the fueler, but then he stopped, and oh my goodness, that was almost a repeat of what we saw in Milwaukee. Thankfully, he stopped before he left.
So the leaders have made their stops. We still have one car sitting off on the edge at the keyhole, and the yellow flag also flies in turn 1. Slowed down, pulled off the course. No indication as to what happened on board Tony Kanaan's car. Montoya, as you saw, got it. Oh, the full course yellow now comes out. Now it comes out. So they've got cars in 3 different places on the course that are in jeopardy. So they've gone for full course yellow. And these are the first incidents of the day. So a complete reversal of the tenor of this race from last year. They get Al Unser Jr.'s car on the hook and try to get him out of there. There's little Al. And they'll also try and get Garcia's car off of the keyhole and get Tony Kanaan out of the way as well. Kanaan is safely out of his car. So there's Garcia. Montoya was able to take the lead of the race just before his pit stop. With a 12-second stop, maintain the lead of the race. As they came out of the pits, Paul Tracy was able to move around Dario Franchitti and into second place. So there they are, 1, 2, and 3. Montoya, Tracy, Franchitti. That's Scott Pruitt behind, but he's actually a lap off the lead of the race. We'll be back. 18-wheelers. Who's that driving? Well, there's Helio Castro-Neves in a miniature of one of Carl Hogan's big trucks. He's having some fun around the paddock here earlier in the week. Don't forget, you want to get up to date on all going on in racing, RPM Tonight is the place. And for more, log on to ESPN.com, part of the Go Network, go.com. Well, this crowd here loves to watch Tony Kanaan because it's a hometown team. Unfortunately, they're going to be a bit disappointed because he's out. Gary, what's the story?
Yeah, we talked with Steve Horner. Remember, on their first stop, he limped into the pits. They thought it was a telemetry problem. He didn't have enough fuel to get there and get him back out. And then a situation now where apparently they just weren't getting fuel pickup on the course. Steve Horn says he doesn't know exactly what the problem is, but it's a major one, and obviously it's ended their day. And it's great disappointment because this team is based in Hilliard, Ohio, about an hour, 15 minutes from the track. They had brought in all the family members from the team to enjoy this weekend here, all rooting for Tony, who started in the second row. They were 180 strong, and they've run into a lot of frustration. Now, if I can make the same move at the same time, Michel Jourdain was just walking by here, and we've stopped him to find out what happened. You've been in and out of the pits. You've had kind of a nightmare afternoon. Why?
Yeah, it's been really tough. I don't know, I guess the pickup of the fuel tank wasn't working properly because it was a big misfire every, I don't know, like when the tank got like down to 22 gallons, I had to come in because it was a big misfire. So it was hard to run full tank of fuel all day long. And then at the end, the gearbox broke, so it was...
Thank you very much, Michelle. Al Unser Jr. just went by us, incidentally, guys, and we hollered at him, and he said he was going back to the transporter trailer. We can't get a signal from that particular area, so hopefully maybe we can catch up with him later.
Al Unser Jr., remember, ran off at turn 1. It was a light angle on the blow, so Al Unser Jr. appears to be okay. Roberto Moreno trying to get everybody going up there. He ran 58 miles an hour coming out of the pits on his last stop. And as a result of that 58, 8 over the limit, he's going to get assessed a penalty. I think he's trying to get everybody past him. Now Tony Kanaan also out of the race. Jan Beekes.
Yes, another one of the hometown heroes. I know you want to run well here. What, is fuel related, I understand?
Yeah. Well, we don't know what happened. And before the first pit stop, we ran out of fuel. And before the second one, one lap before the second one, we still ran out of fuel again. So it's something with the fuel pickup. I don't believe our guys made a mistake. I think it's something wrong with the fuel tank. So it's a tough luck. I was running pretty good, top 4 all day. So it's tough. Let's go to Chicago and do it again, like probably what we did in Michigan.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Now the Kart FedEx Championship Series races next Sunday at the new track in Chicago. Coverage on ABC. Well, Juan Montoya is still out in front under the full course yellow, followed by Tracy and Franchitti. Chris Carnegie's works for Kanaan, but he's also a juggler. And do some pretty serious juggling on some of those pit stops, don't you?
I think you should be wearing some Nomex, Paul.
We'll be back with more from the Miller Lite 200. League World Series begins on Tuesday of this week. We'll take you right up to the championship game on ESPN2. The championship is on the 26th of August. Now, for more, log on to ESPN.com. Part of the Go Network, go.com. We're ready to go back to green on this first and only full course caution of the day. It's Montoya, Tracy Franchitti, 11 races out of the 14 this season. Juan Montoya has led a race. He's now led over 702 laps.
First restart of the day. Paul Tracy, remember, never got sucked in of being out of sequence with Montoya. He was right underneath his gearbox at Detroit last weekend. But look at Montoya's got the jump. Can Paul hang with him?
To the carousel just ahead of the pit straight.
Green.
Flag is ahead. It comes out green. Here we go. Back to racing. Montoya, Tracy Franchitti right through the first turn. Herta, Vasser, Pappas next in line. Montoya stretches it out into the keyhole. Herta goes under Pruitt, not for position. It's Vasser that's chasing Herta. Vasser tries to get around Pruitt. He'll do so down at the bottom of the hill. Brian Herta sits in 4th place. Hometown crowd for Herta, Bobby Rahall's team. Jan?
Well, it's also Bobby Rahall's team, and he's also on the radio with Brian Herta, and he was coaching him every step of the way on that restart. He had one of his crew watching to see if the pace car came in. He was watching the monitor and was coaching him all the way. Okay, these guys are getting ready. Come on, Brian. So he's enjoying now being able to coach from the other side of the fence.
And Rahall's other car is the one you ride with. It's Brian Herta, or Max Pappas. You can see on his helmet, he now has a website. Good stop for the Rahall team, though. Pappas moved from 8th to 6th on the stops. Back up at the front again. Montoya, Tracy, Franchitti. Remember, Franchitti was a little bit faster in the early stint of laps. So there may be some decision making going on over at Team Green on how they're going to handle these final laps of the race. 66 complete and 17 to go.
Well, we've also learned something about Juan Montoya this weekend. We know that he's blindingly fast. We know that he's great on restarts. But now we've learned he's also able to extend fuel mileage as well, if not better, than anybody else in the paddock. A lot of people have said Montoya's speed comes from being extremely smooth. In fact, he's exactly the opposite. He's working the wheel all the time, the throttle, much like Ayrton Senna, dancing the car on the ragged edge all the time. Almost exactly the opposite style of Dario Franchitti, who is silky smooth. And right now, the championship is coming down between those two. Will there be Team Green orders to try to get Dario in front of Paul if Dario can't do it on his own to protect the championship lead?
Montoya was fastest on the last lap by a full 2 miles an hour. Gary Gerald, what's Team Green got planned to try and deal with this?
Well, I think we can answer Parker's question. There may, in fact, well be team orders. We talked with Barry Green and said, what's the challenge right now? And he says, well, it's Paul's job to go after and to get Montoya. But they've warned Paul that Franchitti is right behind him. He says if Montoya starts to pull it out and if Paul can't catch him, then we may end up swapping the positions, trying to get another precious point or two for Franchitti.
Robbie Gordon passed Mauricio Guzman on the lead start, moved into 11th place. Here comes the rest of the field. Boy, look at this with Moore, Guzman, Gordon. Moore gets around Guzman, comes in behind Gordon. We were just talking about Gordon getting around. Oh, that's a 11th, 12th, 13th right now. Richie Hearn in there in the Bud car just behind him.
Greg Moore's players team getting the job done in the pit stops just like they did last week at Detroit.
Blundell works inside of Hearn. Wouldn't think he could do it there.
And now Moore doing his part on the racetrack. Hearn having a very good weekend.
On to the pit straight. Couple changes that you're going to see come up next week. Blundell, who has had a livery change, a paint job change on his car for the past 2 races, will go back to his standard Motorola livery next week. And I believe we already mentioned, but let's do it again, that Robbie Gordon will be next week in a Dan Gurney Eagle. He's going to run the Eagle on the ovals. Montoya leads by 3.2 seconds. Tracy and Franchitti and Herta, they follow. Miller Lite 200 to the closing lap. 200 on board with the leader, Juan Montoya, 3.2 seconds ahead of second place Paul Tracy. Nothing has changed since we left you. And on the last lap, Montoya pulls out another full second on Tracy. Look at that interval grow.
He is flying. Now, normally in a position like this, you'd want to get some interval so that when you come up behind lap traffic, you've got some room to work with. But there is a certain point of diminishing returns. You don't want to push the engine, the gearbox, the tires too hard. But I think Montoya's only got 1 gear, and that's flat out 1 speed that he knows. It keeps him in his rhythm, keeps him focused, and at Mid-Ohio, that's extremely important.
Again, 2 miles an hour faster on the last lap. Nemo Gidley has a problem. Smoke showing at the back of the car. Trying to keep it up and out there and at least get it back to the pits.
Now he's got
a turbo fire back there.
Nemo, a lot of experience, Formula Atlantic champion and go-kart champion, looks for the nearest fire extinguisher.
One of the things the drivers do pay attention to is where all the corner stations are located, where all the holes in the fence are. You see them marked by yellow bordering so they know where they can go for help and know exactly where the fire equipment is. Local yellow only in that area for Nemo Gidley. Back to the front of the race, Franchitti, 3rd place. Montoya, Tracy, Franchitti. And in the ongoing points fight, well, if it stays this way, remember that Dario got the single point for the pole, and he has led the most laps, so he picked up 2 points. Well, even if Montoya would win this thing, Franchitti will still maintain the point lead, but it's tight and very slim. Lap now complete for the leader, Montoya. Back further, you're on board with Richie Hearn. Mark Blundell is just behind him. Richie is in 14th. Blundell's been working him pretty hard. So Richie is sandwiched in between the 2 Pac West cars.
Richie's been running the development Toyota engine. We've referred to it as the Phase 6. It's the RV8E, but this weekend he's gone back to the same engines that Gordon and the Arcero Wells team of Pruitt and D'Amata have been running, as well as Dan Gurney's All-American Racers, which is the RV8D. They found that the older engine, which has been developed now for quite some time, is producing a little bit more power, has a little bit more range of flexibility for throttle response. Richie had a great qualifying in 12th place and is now competitively in the hunt for points this weekend.
These 2 cars, the Green Machine, are 5 seconds behind that man. Juan Montoya comes across the line, completes his 72nd lap on his way to perhaps a victory in the Miller Lite 200 at Mid-Ohio. Brian Herta slows over at the bottom of the long run, coming off of the keyhole. He pulled offline. Remember, Herta was running 4th. So that'll bring Vassar, Pappas, DeFerrin, and Castroneves forward. Montoya is still your leader. Tracy is chasing him, though 6 seconds back. And Dario Franchitti is lined up right behind Tracy.
Montoya, Tracy, and Franchitti had stabilized all in the 108.2.3 second range, but on that last lap, Montoya went down to a 1 minute 7.6 second lap. So they obviously have given him the green flag to go, and with that lap, set the fastest race lap by a huge distance over anyone else.
Well, everybody should be, in fact, fat on fuel running to the finish, so you assume the commands are full open for everybody. Let's go to Jan.
Well, the situation for Bryan Herta is it is engine or electronic related. They're going to try and bring him here onto pit road and change one of the electrical boxes that control the engine. But unfortunately, as we can see, he's lost a lot of ground.
And he's trying to find the spline so he can get the wheel back on the column. I think he finally gave up on it. Juan Montoya, what a remarkable story he has been. What a remarkable rookie this year. And he's on his way to equaling the rookie record set by Nigel Mansell. He can, in fact, see a checkered flag at the end of this race. There's Gil de Ferran. De Ferran sits in 6th. And here comes Helio Castroneves. Carl Hogan machine. That lucky Buckeye got him to 7. I want it to be a little luckier than that.
Castroneves was quickest in the first practice session on Friday, and really Friday was the only day of running they had. Yesterday being washed out. Fell back a little bit in the afternoon qualifying session, starting in 7th place, but is now having a strong run in 7th place.
Behind Castroneves, Michael Andretti. There's Michael. From time to time, you can get a glimpse of Cristiano D'Amata and Robbie Gordon, Greg Moore. They're all lined up behind him. 75 laps now complete for the leader, Juan Montoya. There's D'Amata, there's Gordon. Scott Pruitt, who is off the pace, a lap down. You know, the two Toyota engines there, D'Amata and Gordon, looks like they're getting pretty close together. That could be an interesting fight very quickly here. Back to the front, Montoya leads. 7.4 seconds over Paul Tracy. 75 laps complete. We go to the closing laps of this run with Juan Montoya trying to do it again here in his rookie year with just 8 laps to go. Still, nothing has changed since we left you. Tracy, Franchitti, Vassar, that's the lineup. Gary Gerould.
Rob Hill watches from the wall with the crew as Montoya gets by. What have you done to give this car so much strength? Because I know he was frustrated after this morning's warm-up session.
Basically just played with it a little bit, small changes. We thought we still had a good car. We just needed to fine-tune a little bit.
Did you have to do anything that you consider a big calculated risk or gamble?
No.
This kid's amazing, isn't he?
He really is.
Not many words, but a lot of smiles.
Well, in this case, that team lets their actions speak louder.
And on that last lap, Montoya has now raised the bar. He's the only driver to have gotten in the 1-minute 6-second bracket. He's lowered the quickest lap of the race by almost a half a second. Only Tracy now and Jimmy Vassar in the 107s. Amazing.
Mauricio Guzman slows down. He had been reporting some oil pressure problems. So if that's in fact the problem, then perhaps it's an engine, Jan?
Yes, that's what the team is saying. They say it is engine related, that in fact it blew up.
That is engine related.
That would be.
Montoya, Tracy, Franchitti, Vassar, the top 4. Look at the lead he's got. 6 to go for Montoya. You know, what amazes me about this is I talked to him on Friday. At the end of the day, feeling pretty good, but when I asked him about the car, he didn't seem all too pleased with the car. Thought it was very difficult to drive. Well, Rob Hill has indicated they made some changes, but I wonder how extensive those were, and if it just, once again, we'll ride with him a little bit here and watch him, whether or not it's just, again, a case of Montoya overcoming everything.
Well, when we did speak to him on Friday, he said the car was loose. And when Montoya tells you the car's loose, this is a guy who's normally turning right on left-hand corners on the ovals. That car is really loose. But as we ride on board with him, we can see that the back of the car is very, very stable. He's not having to make any corrections at all. a little bit there just coming off of turn number 1, but obviously they've done something this car.
You're plus 10.
Or the racetrack has come back to him. Mid-Ohio is a very finicky track, and then it changes a great deal from moment to moment, let alone day to day. And maybe it's just a matter of the track coming back to Juan Montoya, but the car looks extremely well behaved now. As you can hear, Chip Ganassi's pulled the interval out to over 10 seconds over Paul Tracy, who's now ahead of Dario by a full second. What an amazing young man.
Tracy and Franchitti 10 seconds back are right together. Vassar's another 3 seconds back from Franchitti. 78 laps complete and 5 to go. We're going to take you all the way to the checkered flag here. Montoya, despite the race being dominated, the most laps led by Dario Franchitti, has taken over at the front. And boy, once he got there, he was gone. .79 laps complete, 4 to go. Here's that fight for second. And remember, Paul Tracy is now focused on the championship, despite the fact he didn't run the first race of the year at Miami. It's going to be some fairly significant points for him. Back in the field, battle for 10th as Greg Moore closes on Robbie Gordon. Gordon's got Cristiano D'Amata about 100 yards ahead. Michael Andretti, all three are fighting for position. Andretti is 8th. Scott Pruitt is the only one in that line that is not part of the fight. Pruitt is right now in 17th position, a lap behind the lead.
Cristiano D'Amata trying to push Michael Andretti. They're running almost exact lap times. I don't know if there's anything left to get closer. This whole group, in fact, is running very similar lap times. And watching them drive around the course, it doesn't seem that any particular car combination has an advantage over anyone else. As they crest this race, typically in the past, at this stage in the race, you could see the back of the cars really step out. It shows you how all of the teams have improved their game, how solid the back of the car is now as they're trying to get all that horsepower down. And that is a very steep rise that they go over. Before, drivers were really hanging on, and now you can see it looks like the second lap in qualifying. The cars look much more stable.
Back forward in the field, there's Jimmy Vasser in 4th place. He's just about 2.5 seconds behind Dario Franchitti, so if anything changes ahead of him, he can be up in that fight pretty quickly. Montoya still has 10 seconds, now almost 11 on Paul Tracy. And Tracy has 2 seconds on Dario Franchitti. This will be the finish of the 81st lap. 83 the scheduled distance. Montoya through 1. Everybody rich on fuel. They can go as fast as they want. Montoya, though, unchallenged here with 2 to go. Montoya's family is here, his father, his girlfriend. They're all at the track. Most of the drivers now have taken to using motor coaches to stay, especially at a beautiful scenic place like the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, so that they're right there in the paddock, not far from their car. In the paddock here on Friday night, they had the taste of kart at Mid-Ohio for the championship auto racing auxiliary tyranny. Every one of the hospitality units put out some sort of refreshment, food. All the chefs went to work. It was a great evening.
Great layouts, and we must add that one of the hospitality areas, specifically Honda,
white flag, 1 to go.
had their chefs and crew dressed up in Gilligan's Island outfits, since their whole theme was South Pacific's seafoods, and it was pretty riotous to see.
The fans here had a good time with it. Final lap for Juan Montoya. Tracy came across the line 11 seconds behind. Franchitti, as he came across the line, was really not in a challenging position on Tracy. Jimmy Vasser 14 seconds back.
At Paul Chip Ganassi doing some cheerleading for Jimmy Vasser. He'd like him on this last lap to be able to somehow get by Franchitti and deprive him of one more of those precious championship points.
Well, that in fact is a possibility at this point. Montoya is going to encounter some slower traffic down as he gets to the lower elevations of the course. This turns him back up the hill and back up toward the pit area.
He'll just lay back here, Paul. He's got such a big lead. He's not going to take any chances or push.
Juan Montoya on his way to his very first win on a natural road course and his first win since Cleveland.
Beautiful,
As the checkered flag
beautiful. You're the man.
flies.
Great job today driving. You did a great job driving today.
Montoya, his fifth win of the year.
Great pit stop as well.
They're going to take you back to that battle for second, see if it indeed is one. And it's not. And there comes Jimmy Vasser across the line as well. Vasser's going to finish it in fourth. Now back a little further. Greg Moore, Robbie Gordon, that whole group lined up there. Andretti and D'Amata. They come through the pace. Moore is trying to get on top of Gordon coming to the finish, and he can't do it. So the race is run. Montoya takes the win by 10.93 seconds over Paul Tracy, followed by Franchitti, Vasser, Pappas, and Gil de Ferran. The unofficial results for the Miller Lite 200. This is the earliest that a rookie has ever won 5 races. He did it in 14. Took Mansell 15 to win 5 in 93. Franchitti picks up the point for the most laps led and for the pole, and that helps him. And Greg Moore goes from 25th to 11th. Here's Gary Gerould.
Juan Montoya getting congratulations from Chip Ganassi, the rest of the team. There's a beautiful trophy from the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course being presented now on behalf of Miller Lite for winning the 200. Now, I want to ask you, because I know you were very frustrated early today about the car and its balance. What happened to make this car so good in this race?
But I think we made some changes and the car improved through all the weekend. You know, this morning I wasn't very happy with the car still. I think Morris did a great job. He changed the car, and just more rubber in the track, the car just got better and better and better.
Did you think when you started this race that it was good enough that you might be able to challenge and get a win?
Not really, you know, unless when I had so much traffic at the beginning, I couldn't do anything. So I just leaned the car right down and just wait for the pit stops.
The first pit stop, I believe you went from 8th to 3rd. I don't think you can get any better service than that, can you?
I know, it was great. I think the guys did a great job, you know. We still managed to do that extra lap than anybody else, so that helped a lot.
The championship titans. Let's go to the other man in this chase right now with Jan.
And of course, that would be Dario Franchitti, who got out of the car extremely exhausted, having worked with Barry Green. You feeling okay now? I know you gave it your best effort, and this is a hot racetrack.
Yeah, I don't feel physically that tired. I'm just pretty upset about the about something none of us can do anything about. We had a slow puncture in the second after the first pit stop, and it was just killing us. The car was all over the place. The car was great the first session, and then this slow puncture just cost us track position. You know, the back markers were a joke today. You know, some of them, I think we need to put some big mirrors on these things. It's a joke. So I was upset. You know, I think the puncture cost us the race, but the back markers certainly didn't help.
But from a championship standpoint, you are right there. It's not as if you fell out. So does that give you any consolation?
Yeah, not really. I mean, you know, I think we should have been up the front today. At the end there, you know, I was keeping a consistent gap to Paul. I didn't have enough to get past him, but I wasn't about to start bleating on the radio that he was holding me up, because he really wasn't that much. If I'd have got by him, I'd have probably run a couple of tenths a lot quicker, but nothing else. So there wasn't any point in upsetting the order of things. I'm just a bit fed up with the result, to be honest. I think we had the thing under control until the problems.
And of course, the emotions are high anytime there's a championship on the line.
You can't do anything about that puncture. Here is the race for the championship, and what is being voiced by Dario Franchitti there, in fact, is what has been said time and time again by many of the leaders in the series. They're concerned about the back markers. The Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, as Montoya's car heads for its mandatory tech inspection. We look at the results again. Jimmy Vasser with a 4th has equaled his best finish of the year.
And attaboys this weekend to Brian Herta. He had such a promising weekend. He's had such a difficult season. After running so strong, he fell out because of mechanical problems. Cristiano D'Amata finishing in 9th place. And Greg Moore, what a great run from 25th place all the way up to 11th.
Moore and Blundell both started in the back. Blundell 26th to 13th, and Greg Moore 25th to 11th. Jan?
Yes, it was a very nice run, but we also see a frustrated Greg Moore, because this is a tough racetrack to come from the back, isn't it?
Yeah, there just doesn't seem to be any passing here. So, you know, it was difficult, you know, because we a little bit slower than some of the guys in the straightaway. We must have had a different setup on the car or something. But you know, so it's frustrating that way. But I mean, all in all, we got 2 points. We're leaving Mid-Ohio with a car that's intact, which is better than we did last year. So you know, I think if we'd have started up near the front, you know, in the top 10, we could have been in the top 5. But you know, we just started too far back to really make any headway.
And remember, guys, we're going back to an oval, and Greg Moore, he loves those.
Yeah, we head down to the end of the season. 1 week it will be an oval, the new Chicago Speedway, as now the volunteer workers and the rest of the kart series working to get the track cleared off at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course. The race has been run here, and Juan Montoya has scored his 5th victory of the year. 1 week from now, the Kart FedEx Championship Series heads off to the Target Grand Prix of Chicago. Brand new course that Chip Ganassi put together for us. There is the coverage that we will have for you next week with the race itself on ABC. Now, as is our tradition, our Toyota Spotlight, the final one of the day, takes you back to the race just run and some of the key moments of this race. This has been a presentation of ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports, proud to be celebrating our 20th anniversary. For more, log on to ESPN.com, part of the Go Network, go.com. Paul Page, Parker Johnstone, Garrett Gerald, Jan Biggis. Join us in a week. ATP Tennis